Yes, tonight's edition of Full Course Yellow is proudly brought to you by the Spirit of Cricket, distilled from the tears of MCC members for over 150 years. Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of Full Course Yellow. It's good to see you once again. We're talking all things motorsport, not the spirit of cricket. Well, we might mention it a little bit later, but no, let's talk about sport. Let's talk about the real sport, the big things that happened over the weekend. Most of the big things happened overseas. But some of them involved Australians and Kiwis and all that sort of thing. So joining us once again, we've got Peter Johnson, we have Mark Jones, we also have Craig Doc Latigo and Richard Outram joining us as well. So guys, welcome to the program.
Good evening.
Good evening, Brett. Good evening, gentlemen.
Hello. Good evening, people.
Now it's got the I suppose we should perhaps start off with the
SVG.
start off with. Yeah, with
pulling out of Wimbledon. Oh, okay.
Well,
or
possibly that, but yeah, I think SVG. I don't know about everybody else. I got up. I was up fairly late, and I turned on at about with about 24 laps to go, and he was in 18th place. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh, yeah, okay, he must have been caught up, or he's a bit further back than I expected him to be. But anyway, nonetheless, 18's not bad. And then sort of about 3 laps.
Stops, was he, Brett?
Sort of. He was coming back because I didn't see the throw. But yes, he got. They shortened the race because of the delays over the rain and because it was getting dark. So he was sort of out of sequence for everybody else. But it was one of those things where as you were watching it, and the American commentators were taking no notice at all. But it was like, he was 18th, and then 2 laps later he was 15th, and then he was 13th, and then suddenly he was in the top 10, and it was about that time that I went,
hold it a second.
He's going to he's doing it again. We've seen this before.
Yes.
But usually the commentators
fresh
got those
tyres.
Usually the commentators got those little green arrows on how many spots you're gaining
and
everybody else. And I mean, if they can't pick up on their statistics that are in front of them right there, well, then they're...
But he just creeps up on you. He just picks them off one at a time, and they're not expecting it.
It was, as I said, it was
rubbing.
Well, and it was so. As I said in the news on tomorrow night's show on Channel 31, it was almost with surgical precision. We've seen it before. He sized his way through the pack, and it's been really interesting. Listening to some of the people. I mean, I think it was Kyle Larson. Just he was just dumbfounded with it. He said, he was behind me and I came through. I had a really good couple of corners and thought, well, I'd have shaken him off now. And I looked in the mirror and I thought, oh my God, he's passed me. It was
one of the.
He's so surgical with that. How he does it. Sorry.
Earlier in the race, because I watched it later in the day. Not knowing the results or anything, but earlier in the race, they had one of the earlier restarts, and they're saying, he won't have a clue about the Americans with restarts. And they're aggressive, and I thought, you don't know much.
Yes.
Maybe all the Americans don't have a clue on how he does his restarts compared to all of them. Rest of them do their own way, and then Shane does his the way. Well, a few of them do over Australia, copy the same as what he does.
It's interesting because it's and I've got the quote down here. Denny Hamlin in a podcast was sort of saying similar things to Kyle Larson, where he was. He was pointing out, that he said this was actually a really good thing because the host of the podcast was saying, because Kyle Larson basically said this guy, I thought it might have been Chase Elliott who said that, this guy's going to go back to Australia and say, oh my God, these guys aren't worth much, boy are they overrated. Yeah. But he said, did they make it? He said, did he make us look a bit, silly? And Denny Hamlin was saying, look, he said, this is the best thing that could happen to us. This is why I say this. One of the reasons why this changes everything, because Denny was saying, and it was a very considered, I think, very mature response to it, was he said, this is one of the best things that's ever happened He said because he said we've discovered a brand new style of racing. He said we haven't done street racing before. The street race was a huge success. We brought in somebody from overseas, and as he said, he'd been waiting for this for years. He said at some stage, he said we were going to get one of these guns from Europe or Australia, New Zealand, wherever, who was going to come over, and the conditions it was going to be the perfect storm, and perhaps it's true. Perhaps we're not as good. And he said, look, he said it's a motivation. He said it's a motivation for me to get out there and say, yeah, I can actually go. I can go faster, and we can learn to perhaps drive better in this situation, because it was the first street course for most of them. Some of them have done street courses in either IndyCar or sports cars or things like that.
Briefly years ago, Ambrose used to dominate in the street circuits as well too. Remember?
Well, on the roads, on the road circuits,
Not in the oval stuff as much, but they used to switch to the street to the roads and stuff like that. And he would actually, you intentively, specifically watch that race because you knew Ambrose was going to show some true colours because he just had that much experience when he left Australia.
Anyone...
I saw one of the NASCAR Cup Series drivers was saying that what he'd noticed about Van Gisbergen was his car placement. Like he was able to go so much closer to the walls than the other drivers were able to. Of course, they're all familiar with walls, but they're not pinballing from corner to corner. Well, not actually pinballing.
Yeah, Shane had noticed that himself. He said he said in qualifying, in practice and qualifying, he said he was, once he got used to where he was placing the car and got used to being on the different side of the car and all the rest of it, he said that
the walls,
he said the thing that really made him open his eye and take notice, as he said, is that they just weren't using all of the track. He said they were leaving. There was quite a big margin by Australian supercar standards and street racing standards. He said the margin for error, he said, that was huge compared with what he had. He said we're going up. He said, and we're a millimetre out. He said
whacking mirrors off all the time.
He said I don't have a mirror that I can't guide. I don't have the mirror as a guide.
The interesting thing is, as Mad Cow Mark is saying, "G'day Mark, how are you?" Saying that Whincup's already said, look, if Shane wants to race NASCAR next year, he wouldn't keep him to his contract, and I don't think he could anyway if he wanted to. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, sort of, from my dealings with Shane over the years, and let's not forget, I mean, Shane came in. I don't know whether Richard was in the studio that night, but when he first came to Australia, and he was basically a kid, he did one of his first ever interviews, studio interviews, in with us in at RMIT, and he came in, and Ross Stone and Jimmy Stone had brought him in, and he said then he came in, he was only a kid, and he went, he said, look, before he said, I hate this stuff, I really, and he's never liked it, he's never liked the media stuff. I did love his press conference. If you get a chance, go and have a look at his media conference on the NASCAR YouTube channel, particularly his pointed comments to the one Australian journalist who was there from Australian Auto Action, when he pointed out that, he said, look, he said, you're as relaxed and as happy as I've ever seen you at a racetrack. And he basically, to paraphrase it, he said, I've got, like a really fun bunch of people. I'm not putting up with dickheads, and even the media are great here.
He said that when they interviewed him getting out of the car. He said, "You ask sensible questions, unlike back here."
Yeah, I think that's one thing, but I'm wondering whether he would be happy with the level of pressure, because it's one thing going in and having a few starts over and being a ringer. We know that he quit once, and we know he likes to be with his mates. He likes to get out. I mean, I've run into Shane at all sorts of strange motorsport events, kart meetings, drift meetings, all sorts of things. And you turn up and you've got the camera, and he goes, "Oh no," and you say, "No, it's just all right. You don't want to talk, don't." And he's great when the camera's away from him. Shane's a terrific bloke, and he's not interested in playing media star. He's not interested. All Shane wants to do is get in a car and drive fast and win races. And it doesn't matter whether it's a supercar or a Formula Toyota or a rally car or a speed car, a sprint car, a go-kart, a NASCAR. It doesn't really matter. He just wants to get in a car or a bike, for that matter, and have some fun.
I think he's a little bit like Will Power. I think sometimes that he's a little bit shy, slightly introverted, and that doesn't.
Very introverted, yes.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't translate well in that once you put him under a little bit of pressure to say something coherent.
Yes, it's good to see things haven't changed, Simon. Simon was on the show for many years. Good to hear from you, Simon, and Australia's biggest Jeff Gordon fan, without a doubt. So things haven't changed over the years. I think you're up in Sydney now, so I think, aren't you, doing air traffic controlling or something, or training for that, but anyway, that's So I mean, well, Jeff Gordon.
So yeah, Simon, get off, stop talking to us, and go and bloody get up in the tower because there's a shortage at the moment.
Yes.
Yeah. Simon. Simon was a big, obviously a big Jeff Gordon fan, and Jeff was very good. But it's interesting that I'm not a betting person, but like when I heard that it was, the forecast was wet. I didn't see any odds anywhere. I didn't go looking for them, but I tell you what, if I'd have seen some locally and if they were good odds, I'd have been happy to have thrown $10 at that risk, because as soon as I saw it was going to be wet, I went, this could be interesting.
The conditions played completely into Shane's skill set.
He was driving over the puddles much better than everybody else.
But his pass for the last was amazing. He I've forgotten who was following. He let him through.
Justin Haley.
Yeah, Justin Haley. He let him through underneath him. He backed off, swapped right around him to take him on the inside. He saw it coming. He planned that all from the corners away.
Well, that was something that Kyle Larson and I commented on. That's another thing to look at in the press conference. Have a look at their press conference where they had Kyle Larson and what's his name? I've lost it again. The guy who went past, who was leading that guy, Haley.
Yes, yeah.
Haley, the guy who went, and the look on Haley's face when he saw, he really looks like the rabbit in the in the spotlight. He was just looking ahead, and then. I think it was I think Kyle said something about, he said, suddenly he said, Justin's back in front of him, and I thought, this is going to be a race, and then he just went over the other side and went over through there, and he said, and suddenly Haley just sort of looked around and went,
"What happened?"
Yeah.
He drove it. Once he got in front at the end there, he just drove away.
He played them. He just.
He was totally in control. He did have sort of some fresher tyres on and all of it, but we know that's the thing. We also know how good Shane is on his. So that's how he's won races here. That's how he's.
To get one other important ingredient too. He took one of his guys over from the Triple Eight team as well too. He's one of his engineers,
and that was real.
In collaboration together, they would have had a plan together. With the old plan A, B, C, D, whatever,
Well, that was actually Trackhouse Racing invited Andrew over and just said, said, look, we'd appreciate you coming over, and it might help, because one of the things that Shane said, and one of the things that it really helped in, he said, was almost the language barrier. He said where he would describe things, and he said this was something he got from Marcus Ambrose that.
Yeah, because they just called different components different names.
Yeah, he said different components, he said, and different things. He said, so he would go in there and say, it's a bit soft and just it's oversteering a bit, and it's got there, and they looked at him.
So he knew he never what the components are to translate that language he's using to be able to facilitate a certain particular feel of the car, to give it the grip or whatever what he needed from the car to be able to produce the produce the results he was getting. So yeah, as I said, Andrew going over there, not just the language barrier and the translation as well though too, but just being able for Shane to make, and not saying it's a huge difference, but have a little bit of confidence. He knows he's got a guy in his camp as well too, and also, you know, when it came to pressure situations, even during the race, he could, you know, they're obviously got radios and, you know, that sort of stuff.
Spotters,
and plan A, B, and C, saying, right, if this happens during the race, I want to try this. We'll give this a crack, or we do this, or we do that. So,
well, that's another thing that I think
cards fell in his favour, and he trumped them.
That's another thing that I think is going to change in terms because it's like the NASCAR guys all said, look, we've learned a lot. I mean, particularly the Trackhouse team said, look, we learned a lot from the weekend. But as Pete mentioned, you know, that word spotters, and I'm just wondering, like Shane was saying, well, I've not had spotters before, and he said without the spotters, he would have been caught up in that traffic jam towards the end of the race. He said I had the spotters. I'm just wondering whether sort of, you know, but the fact that you had the 888 guys over there and with Shane, I have no doubt that the moment, and Shane's just got back today, I believe, heading up to Townsville. I have no doubt that in some stage, yeah. Well, they're going to say. I'm sure they're going to say, like, you know, like, okay, well, you know, congratulations. Okay, what did you learn? What, you know, what did they do that we can do? Is where can we learn from what they do?
He might keep a few under his hat.
Well, I think that just being a part of that team, and Shane was very keen on, because he said going in, he said, I'm not sure about this spotter. This is going to, you know, this voice in me here telling me where to go is going to be a bit, you know. But he was very, very happy to have the spotters there, because obviously in
experiencing it. Yep.
Yeah, in a street circuit situation on a road course, they've got more than one spotter up there, and it obviously, you know, it kept him out of trouble, and it gave him the wider view of the track from somebody who was not watching through the filter of a television screen. It was somebody who was actually down on the course who could tell him, you know, what was coming up next and who was behind him and who he was clear of, and you know, because it's. I mean, and Simon.
They've been doing it for Simon's.
Simon and Stephen, who was on the show when best mates with Simon. Steve used to be a spotter for Gene Cook at the Thunderdome, so he knows what. He knows there were people, you know, at the Thunderdome. There were spotters at the Dome, so it's something that we have had here, and I think it's something that, you know, the teams might have a look at some stage, particularly at places like, you know, Bathurst and on the street circuits and Albert Park, where they can sit there and sort of and they can get that feedback.
But they've got to get it down to a fine art too, because as you know, the Americans over there, they've been doing it for decades, and a spotter has to be able to give quick, concise, short things, because otherwise the radio will be filled with bloody damn well 5 people all trying to talk over each other. So it's got to be really quick, concise, and be able to and have a certain code to it. So like 3 such and such coming here, bang, bang, bang. You know, you can't be on and on and on and ramble like we do.
There are teams now that could do it. Brad Jones, because he's had Oscar and NASCAR, I think NASCAR experience.
Yeah,
definitely.
And now Shane, now 888 with Shane and his experience. So there are teams that could do it now.
Yeah, it's just you've got to find the people, and you've also got to find a good spot for them as well, because there are dedicated spots on the track at most American tracks where the spotters stand. There is like a spotters stand, and at some places like India and all that, there's 2 or 3 of them where all the spotters get together. It's one thing. I mean, it's not unknown, because that's one of the things. And I mean, Richard would probably remember that, because we saw it, and we were up there on the top of the pit building at Phillip Island on many occasions when the late Alan Simonson was doing it for Ted Hughlin. Yeah, that was the role that Alan had for Ted. That's what brought Alan to Australia, was sitting there, and he was talking him through. car spins at Lukey, go wide, ease off, switch back across. You'd follow him around and listen to the information that he was passing on to Ted, because Ted was, obviously, not experienced. He was, very much a newcomer to motorsport, and Alan would sit there and sort of, talk him around the track. So it's certainly not a totally new thing.
I remember the Thunderdome. Oh, no, go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say the Project 91 team would have been a bit different as far as handling spotters with Shane, as opposed to the previous driver, Kimi Räikkönen, who
Yes.
of course, loves people on his radio during the race.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I know what I'm doing.
For those who are listening and not watching, Simon's saying that when NASCAR's raced at the Oz Grand Prix, they used spotters around the track there. So that was a long time ago. So, and as I said, Simon was part of that. Was Gene Cook's team as well. So they would know about that sort of stuff. So that's interesting. Oh, yeah, I'm just wondering. The other thing that this changes is the potential pathway for young Australian and New Zealand drivers, because it's like, this is Justin from Trackhouse, who brought Shane across, was sort of saying that we brought him across, and he's obviously, as far as we were concerned, he's the best, but there's plenty of other good ones there as well. And when you have a look at people like Brody Kostecki, who does have some background with stock cars in America, and a very strong interest with that, people like Cam Waters, Chaz Mostert, there'd be, you would imagine that the more road races they have, and if they have more street races, and this one was really successful by the look of it. I looked at a local news coverage in Chicago, and there was a little bit of pushback from the Not In My Backyard brigade, but it was very, very small, and overwhelmingly everybody said, look, this went so much better than we'd ever, despite the weather, this went so much better than anybody ever dreamed. We really want to see more. You would think now that they've done it, that there will be other cities in the United States, including some that might be running street races now for IndyCar, who might go, well, we've had IndyCar for a while. Could we run NASCAR?
You just brought up some great moments. I remember Kimi Räikkönen, and he did a NASCAR. He had a drive once as well too, and he's the Kimi quotes are absolutely hilarious, as you know. And his NASCAR one, I'll have to just abbreviate this one. When he on his NASCAR debut, we're so effing SHI ship. It's unbelievable. So that's how he reacted on the radio when he was his NASCAR review. And there's another couple of good ones here. An interviewer, the most exciting moment during the race weekend? I think so. It's the race start. And the interviewer says, the most boring? Now. Interviewer, Kimi, what happened? I spun. And a bit of a disaster then for you and a few others with the yellow flags. I don't care what happened to the others.
I love him.
It's a very interesting thing, because Mika Hakkinen had the same sort of sense of humour.
It really is. I mean, I remember the last time I interviewed Kimi we were in sort of like the bullpen. And and I thought things were going to go very well, because standing next to me was obviously a crew from, I'm assuming they were from Finland, and Kimi was laughing and they were joking, and I was sort of next in line, and I thought, this is going to he's in a really good mood for a change, because I'd interviewed him previously, and it was monosyllabic. It was like welcome back to Melbourne. What do you think of the track? It's a track. Have you seen much of the city? No. Okay. What about how did testing go? Testing is irrelevant. But he was really up, and it was like, this is great. And he walked over and he was laughing, and he shook hands with the and he gave a thumbs up to the camera and walked there, and it's like, Kimi, welcome back to Melbourne. Hello.
Well, Brett, you don't think yourself very lucky. That's a bloody good interview for Kimmy, because usually some people used to get, what do you want? And he knows what his interview. He's standing there. He's got a microphone. What do you want?
Yeah. Oh no, he's a terrible interviewer. There's not much you can get out of him. He gives monosyllabic answers. He's not really interested. He doesn't want to be a part of it. But then Shane, this is one of the things that like the local media say with Shane. But I've never had problems with it. The few times that I've interviewed Shane, it's because if you push him. I mean, the last time was the supercar launch, and I went up to him and I said, can we grab you for an interview? And he went, oh, rather not. And I said, okay, fair enough. And then he came back himself later and went, oh, yeah, if you wanted it, I'll come back and we'll do it. And he was fine then. I mean, he gets really annoyed with just people asking him, questions for the sake of questions. He doesn't want to be want to be a star. He doesn't want to be he doesn't want to play the game, and that really pisses off a lot of the local media, because it's hang on, guys, it's a two-way street here. I mean, they're trying to beat up controversy, and he's not interested.
They want the fluffy stuff with the popcorn, the generalizations, and the Anyway, but he wants to go more in depth. If they're after a few vodka, you'd expect that, wouldn't you?
Don't we all?
Brett, remember Channel 9, I think, was sticking a microphone under Jack's nose and saying, would you ever wanted to drive a V8 supercar? And he goes,
you were there that day. I mean, that's it. They said, let Channel 9 speak to Jack, and it was all, you won 3 world championships, but you never won Bathurst. Do you? Jack's going, sorry, what? Pardon? Hello? It's like, oh, guys, it's deaf as a post. G'day, Jack, how are you? Hi, how are you? How are you? We chatted away, and we ended up at the table with Jack and his wife, and having we were chatting. I never had any problems with interviewing Sir Jack. It was never a problem. Everyone said, "Oh, there's no point talking to him. He's as deaf as a post." By geez, he could hear well enough when you were talking about wine or kids or.
I had the same. I had a little situation. It was only this year, earlier up in the thing. I don't know if you've found it or not yet, but I was obviously doing the Bathurst 12 hour, and it was great to be up there. And Brett set me up with some media accreditation, and I was back in start of 2020. I went over to the Asia Le Mans when it was brought over to the Bend by the Shahins, and they did a really good job bringing. We had some LMP2 cars and some all the GT3s come around for a round. All from around the world that came over, the ones that wanted to make the effort. And obviously Matt Campbell, factory Porsche driver, and he was over here and racing in the GT3s. And I went up, and I'd never met Matt before, and introduced myself and hi, and just had a good just a normal chat. And I said at the end of it, have a good weekend, etc., etc. So when I went up to Bathurst 12 earlier this year, went into the garage, I just generally walked in the garages and said hello to the people I knew and saw Matt and hi, how you going? But this time I had obviously a camera guy with me, and after having a chat, I said, "Look, Matt, can I have a chat for 5 minutes? This will, back for Victoria for TV. We'd love to have you on, just to see you're on the TV for Bathurst 12 hour for 2023." Oh yeah, all right, no worries. I said, I won't give you much. I'll just go 2 or 3 straightforward questions, nothing there. And the only goes, "Yeah, all right, then okay." I said, "Do you mind if we do it at the back of the garage on the barrel and the seats and and a bit of atmosphere around and the car one way and all the people around the others?" He goes, "Yeah, no worries." And obviously, I got the permission from the social media manager, the support girl was with him. Anyway, so he sat down. Oh no, he either stood or did it like that for a few, 10 minutes with me, blah blah blah. Straight out, everyone after me all jumped in line to try and get an interview with him and approached him. And he just gave him a flat no. Not interested. No, sorry, not bothering. No, I'm not. No, I don't want to talk to you. Thank you. And she had to manage him all and stuff like that. Gave it to me because I got a good rapport with him and I know the guy and hung out with him over in the Bend. But bad luck, rubber duck for everybody else. I'm not.
Well, Mark, you know Matt pretty well, I imagine, because
a bit. Sorry, and just frog in the throat. Yeah, well, I've spent a bit of time with Matt, and I love his work. Yeah, he's he's maybe slightly introverted, I guess, in that. Well, maybe it's a Darling Downs thing, with Will Power and Ben Jezikowski, who's done a bit of work in Asian Le Mans, as you say, or in Lamborghini Super Trofeo Asia. But yeah, no, Matt's terrific. I've always found Matt to be, I guess, kind of chill. Trying to remember actually the last time I think I spoke to him was at his grandfather's funeral at Bill Campbell, the guy.
He gets very emotional about his racing though, Mark. I found as well though too. Probably more than most drivers. He'll wear his heart, not wear his heart in his sleeve, but he's very tough on himself. I've noticed over the years when I've chatted to him, he's makes it pressure on himself rather to perform and do better. If things not necessarily going right, and it may not even be his fault. So yeah, I notice he's very tough on himself to produce the results as well too than some of the drivers I've met over the years. Would you say that's fair too? Yeah,
no, I think that's fair. And I think that the part of that is his personal history in motorsport, because he did Formula Ford like almost all of the 20, 30 years worth of Australian drivers start in Formula Ford, and Formula Ford didn't go well for Matt, and he was only ever sort of top 6, never really top 3, and he sort of fell into racing Porsches as just a fallback, I guess, and that turned into something. And one of the other things about Matt is he's really good in the back half of a season. Like you notice in a lot of his his second half of the season's much better than the first. I mean, it could just be a quirk of statistics in some respects, but like his several of his Carrera Cup campaigns went, and Porsche Cup here in Australia, and then again when he did Super Cup, he had by the end of a lot of the seasons, he's the best driver in the championship, and he's super smooth as a driver, in that sort of Jim Richards mold where there's he's always really tidy, and yeah, I
was surprised he didn't get the Le Mans drive. He was a reserve, but and
well, they've got 10 drivers for 9 seats, so somebody had to miss out.
He'll certainly drive next year. I mean, there's no doubt about that, because there'll be some there'll be customer cars there, and Porsche will want to put a few factory drivers spread around, a few of them around there. So including Proton, who are coming in, so it's so he'll definitely get the drive next. But he went straight back to IMSA and was instantly one of the fastest drivers in that Porsche, and did a great job.
Well, he got in pole position the previous weekend at Laguna Seca. And a circuit that's not exactly the easiest to get on top of, and
no,
but yeah, he's
the famous corkscrew.
But yeah, and that race didn't actually go well for Matt either. There was all kinds of issues, but he qualified brilliantly for that one. So yeah, he's in the bad luck car at the moment. It seems like the number 6 car is getting all the has had a couple of wins, although the most recent race it got
one of them was taken away. Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, and Matt's car, the 7 car, is the one that's having all the mechanical issues. So which sometimes happens in one driver will get the bad luck. It's just not mechanically sound at the moment.
Yeah, but, in Australian supercars, it's called a Ford. It's ones that catch on fire all the time.
Yeah, we'll just cover it briefly. Of course, coming up this weekend is the Townsville 500. another street circuit, which obviously is, and there'll be a lot more international focus on that this weekend, I'm sure, particularly from the United States of America. I've already seen a lot of people online saying, how do we watch this? How do we watch this guy? Because I'm a big fan now, so I'm sure supercars are absolutely. Another thing that's changed about this, but the Mustangs have been given some parity changes, basically around aerodynamics, slightly different profile to increase the span and the angle of attack on the wing, and also a slightly larger rear spoiler sort of on the boot mount to try and give them a bit more stability. And I think not necessarily to make them faster, but I think to help them in not having the rear tyres wear out as quickly, because I think that's been the argument. Is they've been fairly quick in qualifying. They've been fairly quick for the first half or so of the, but they're using their tyres, particularly their rear tyres, a lot more than the Camaros are.
And I'm glad they are doing something now, because they were making noises about doing it in time for Bathurst, and I reckon that if they got it a little bit wrong, and then Ford dominated a ribbon round like Bathurst, then you'd have the Camaros bleating, and it would just.
So you'd have two halves of the season: the Ford bleeding for the half, and then the Holden's bleeding for the other. I can't see that. That's 50-50, isn't it?
Let's face it, Ford have got a bit of form with that over the years. Mr. Rushbrook, who is the head of Ford Performance, I mean, he probably has one of the souvenir sandbags from Le Mans, so he might have handed the possession over, the custodianship over to his Australian teams. But
I shared it privately a little bit of an article from Rusty, which is obviously Russell Ingall in Supercars fame. And one of the biggest, the most important lines of just a normal kicks and giggles type article. It's free for everyone to see. I lifted it from Facebook and I put it into a messenger form for everyone to read. That's on the screen right now. So I do encourage any of our viewers and listeners to have a look at Rusty. And look, all it comes down to is that Rusty actually said that, and he can openly say it. But he said the people I've been talking to, and a lot of people he's been talking to, is that it hasn't been fair all year for all of the teams because of what's going on in the supercars and the parity issues and stuff like that. So, and he said, I'll say it openly, but all the other people I've talked to agree with me. They just can't say it publicly. So it's been an absolute joke this year, and that's coming from Rusty, and he's an ex-champion.
Having said that, actually at Perth and Tasmania, the spread, sure, they weren't on the podium. The forwards weren't on the podium, or don't think they were. But there was an fairly even spread in the top 10 of Camaros.
You said that a couple of weeks ago, Pete. It's been a joke all year. You got to put the whole big picture together. It's been a joke. Why are they making adjustments from whatever round we are coming up to for one particular form of vehicle and not the other? Because it's not right. It's simple. It's plain as a nose on everyone.
Well, the other problem is, I mean, this was rushed through really, really quickly. Yep. I mean, in decent haste.
Absolutely.
And and if they'd have made change, they wanted to sort of let things settle down first and then get an idea of what the trend was like. Because if they'd have jumped in, like after the second or third round and said, okay, there's clearly a problem here, and they'd have made changes, it might have been they wanted to see like a good spread of events, some street circuits, some slower circuits, some faster circuits. Just to make sure. And now, and it was part of it wasn't something they just said, okay, we're going to do this now. It is actually within the regulations in terms of when they can and when they can't institute these parity reviews. And there's certain triggers, and that's what happened at the last round. The trigger was clicked, and it said, right, now we can go back and we can legally go back and have a look at this. So they will make the changes. We will see what the changes do this weekend in Townsville.
They shouldn't, for all this that's been going on, and then every single little different tweaking or change, whatever terminology you want to use for the whole year, they should just wipe the points for the year. I mean, yes, there's going to be some.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far.
Well, seriously, there's obviously teams that are struggling out there, and there's teams that are obviously in front and they've got more development. Some teams have had an advantage because they had their parts and vehicles together before others. Because it was a lottery. They all actually got to pick out the chassis. All came out there as a draw, and everyone got the bloody Chook Lotto ball out, so they got their chassis in an order. So it wasn't what thought was it. But obviously, with the teams a week or two out before the season started, didn't even have one of their cars together. It was that's
why it was so quick. But as Mark's saying, how have the Fords won any races? Well, they've only won the one, haven't they? There was Cam Waters won.
Yes, and then they won.
He would have won it. It would have won a second, but
would have won a second.
It would have wanted it to be a barbecue rather than a car.
Yeah, I think so, but that's. But anyway, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, it certainly adds a little bit of. It certainly adds a little something to. I think this is true too. As they're saying, top five in Chicago were Chevys, so Aussie Ford fans would have had a field day, and you see that a lot in NASCAR as well. You'll see there are certain tracks that are Toyota tracks, there are certain tracks that are Ford tracks, certain tracks that are. I think that's what they were sort of hoping, that if there was any sort of change in. That even though there was different vehicle dynamics as a direct result of the difference in the car, the difference with NASCAR is they're still all 6-litre pushrod V8s as far as so now you've got you've got a pushrod V8 in the Camaro, you've got an overhead cam engine in the Ford, so they're delivering their power in a different way from what they do in NASCAR. Different power curve, different and different capacities and all the rest of it. So it is a juggling act, and hopefully it'll be some better racing.
They delayed it for an extra year because of the Gen 2, the Gen 3, for all the circumstances, whether it be COVID and blah, 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 and manufacturing.
I don't think they could because I think they needed to strike that because Holden.
No, but they delayed it for 1 year before that. But they got to because of COVID. They had to throw them in because the other cars were gone. They're basically on the scrap heap. Every team was basically just putting spare parts together left, right and centre to use up what they had left because they'd all been, the decision had been made. But the trouble is, they've just drawn so much criticism because they rushed it in the end anyway. And they haven't got it right. It's just plain and simple. They did not get it right. So, they're probably just going to have to say, well, we're going to have to cop it all year because we've stuffed up and now let's just try and get it all right done before the end of this year. That way we can start afresh next year and we hopefully have things that, we have some entertainment at a respectable level from whatever angle you want to look at.
Yeah,
you've got on the mute, Brett. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm having a coughing fit at the moment. So that's coming up this weekend. The Formula One also happened on the weekend, and another dominant performance by Mr. Max Verstappen. There's some parity issues there. I mean, but Ferrari did a better job. They came good, and and
Sergio is back.
Yes, Sergio, unfortunately, apart from qualifying, but certainly in the sprint race, and he came back through the field. And so you assume that if he'd have had a better qualifying session, that he would have been more of a
Did he drive on the
challenge.
track in the race? Oh, so I was just checking.
Sorry?
Did he drive on the track in the race, or was he out? Did he have all the 4 tyres off the lines like he usually does?
In qualifying,
I'm being sarcastic.
Qualifying, that's what pinned him in qualifying.
I'm being sarcastic.
It's interesting that the FIA and the management of the Red Bull Ring are getting together to sort of talk about exactly what happened. Because I mean, I think the fact that so many did it, and and I think it's right to say that a lot of people said, look, it really did become one or two. You would say, look, they're just pushing it, but the fact that so many people did it. It became farcical in the end. I mean, it was
ban them all, disqualify them all. Simple.
You can't.
Give everyone a 5-second
That would
penalty.
have looked really stupid.
But
Yeah.
every single team principal or team engineer or like that, they did not support their drivers on it. They all criticised their drivers and say, straightforward, drive on the track, and we've got no sympathy as a team for you. They all back.
Well, I think that's sort of. I think some of that is covered by there of Toto effectively telling Lewis to basically shut up and drive the thing. I get the impression that Toto's patience with Lewis and his complaining might be starting to get a little thin at this stage.
I've got a cheese grater over here. I'll see if Toto wants to borrow it.
So I think that so I don't think he's particularly happy, but. Mercedes are hoping to have even more upgrades for the British Grand Prix, including so there's a few things.
That's also coming up this weekend.
Yeah, so we've got plenty to sort of cover over the weekend. So there, and Oscar will hopefully have the improvements that Lando had on his McLaren, and there's some more coming there as well. So it'll be interesting this weekend on a number of issues.
The McLaren livery as well too. They're going to throw some a gleaming silver back into the car as well too, in a bit more retro. So that'll be good to see. And Lando was one of the instigators apparently on that, the livery.
Yeah, Duncan Cameron saying the series, if Supercars, they'd be racing production based cars. I'd love to see them racing production based cars, but there's just none out. If we were racing production based cars, we'd be seeing like we do in series production racing. We'd be seeing basically BMWs dominating.
BMWs,
wall of BMWs, and then perhaps somewhere back. Like depending on them, then do you ban any four-wheel? Do we have four-wheel drives? And who's making something?
Audi have stopped. Days.
Yeah, I mean, so there's really very few cars. I'd love to see that's why I like in state racing. I like improved production because. Yeah, you can get it. You can get a car and you can modify it and you can make it. You can make it more. More. Keep the DNA of the production car, but also make it more competitive, which you can also do with sports stands. Incidentally, coming up tomorrow night on In Pit Lane on Channel 31, we have a look. Went out to Ringwood to the workshop of Travis Condon, and he's got the car he calls the Turtle, which is very much an old-fashioned sports sedan. It's not a space frame. It's not sort of a carbon swoopy sort of DTM Super GT type thing. It's a $200 car, Corolla that he bought from a mate, and slowly but surely, he's improved it and done a little bit here and a little bit there, and it's getting more and more competitive. And he's having a lot of fun with it, and we put it up on the hoist and had a look underneath it. We had a good look at the aero, and he's got a mate who's into aerodynamics and does that stuff, and so he's helped out there for what you can do with that particular model Toyota. It's not the most aerodynamic car out there, but anyway, it's a really good thing. If you like sort of backyard specials and the tradition of the Australian special, be watching tomorrow night on In Pit Lane for Travis and the car he calls the Turtle. And at some stage we'll talk about where that came from.
Just going back to if you'd like to see a series, I would like to see Mr. Richard Outram to my left on screen, right if you're viewing, in a nice little Hyena N series and flicking around in one of those. I don't call them Hyundais all the time. They're Hyenas. You just laugh at them because back in the day when they were released on the streets of Melbourne and every other part of Australia, you used to They used to do the joke.
I'm doing the best I can.
I know, but how fun would it be to go for a whirl or a spin in one of those little N series? That'd be absolutely, they only come out in manuals. You've given an absolute flogging, I reckon, Richard. That'd be a great.
I'm still trying to learn how to drive a front-wheel drive. To be quite honest,
another one is when they age a little bit is the Stingers. That'd be great to see those twin turbos, to see what those things are capable of as well too.
Yeah, but you're talking about you.
Sorry, go. It's go because it's getting back to Jeremy Lydiard's comment that you just put up. Aside from Verstappen running away with it, behind him, it was actually quite an interesting race. It was actually quite a good race.
Yeah, that's been pretty much the case all year. I think sort of, I mean, you've got two cars and one particular driver, but two cars that are certainly in a class of their own. Then you've got sort of, like it's depending on the conditions and depending on, like a whole bunch of things. You've got a group of Ferrari, Mercedes, Aston Martin, sort of in the third one, and then. And then you've got sort of, and then you've got a group after that, like quite a large group with people like Alpine and those guys and McLaren and those guys in the back having some good race. I mean, there was some great racing in the midfield and at the back of the pack. There was some fantastic stuff going on. The Haas and
I'm enjoying
Alfa
it more.
Romeo.
It's not necessarily the race. You know what's been the most fun probably this year, I think, in Formula One? It's because you can't predict it, who is going to drop out in qualifying in Q3 and Q2, because there has been some massive surprises all the way through almost every single country, every single event, where you think, oh, Sergio's just dropped out there. Lewis Hamilton's out in Q3. Oh my God! Look at that. There's such and such. They've gone out, and you cannot. Gone with the days like 5-10 years ago, and you can go, all right, okay, the two Hasses are going to do. We'll have a look at Hulkenberg. Last two bloody qualifying sessions for the two races, he's been in the almost 5 top 10.
But then that's basically what Pete's saying. I mean, like, if you have a look at qualifying, we've had Hulkenberg at times. We've even had Alex Albon on occasion. So,
and hence my lower third tonight. Mine's a bit of a funny dig on a two-way street. Mine's a pub raffle meet try at AlphaTauri. One, what are they going to be called? Because obviously a Yuki on the weekends, it's going to be called Team Yuki from now on next year. So that was just he's taken up for a bit of fun. Or the other thing is, big $64 question is all these. I forget even the Daniel Ricciardo rumors. He's not even in Formula One at the moment. Yuki's only, everyone thinks he's pretty certain of a drive next year for AlphaTauri because he's going to get his contract renewed. But De Vries is gone. If Yuki is not renewed and it just doesn't happen, who's going to be at that unnamed team next year? There could be two new drivers. You never know.
Well, if Red Bull,
Sargent.
Well, no, he's been very disappointing as well. I think the odds-on favourite at the moment that I'd say for AlphaTauri is Liam Lawson, because he's not putting a foot wrong in Japan. I mean, Red Bull have invested a lot of time and effort into him. He's certainly not let anybody down. He's good with the media. He's very popular with that. He's got the touch of the Dan Ricciardo's about him. He's not quite as wacky as Dan, but he's very friendly, and the media love him and the public love him. He's very friendly. So
Williams is a better prospect at the moment.
I think he would. I think Lawson would be the red hot go for AlphaTauri. I can't see Dan come. I can't see. Well, whatever they call it, I think that I think Liam Lawson is the obvious person. I'd be really surprised.
But De Vries anyway, if Yuki keeps his spot.
Yeah, and then it depends on sort of I think it also depends on what the manufacturer, the engine manufacturer one, because at the moment they're running the Honda. I don't know what's happening with the. Do we know what's happening, Pete, with the Ford deal? I mean, is that just for Red Bull, or does that take in AlphaTauri as well?
I don't know.
I don't know. So, Honda have said they want to be. They now got excited again. So, with Honda coming back, if Honda hang around, then Yuki will definitely hang around.
Yeah, and the other
thing
is
there's every chance that Red Bull will offload what's now called AlphaTauri, because the new Dietrich Mateschitz, like I said last week, isn't that interested in motorsport, and he's happy to keep Red Bull because they're doing well and they're promoting the drinks, but the fashion label that is not such a big deal, so they're happy to potentially offload AlphaTauri.
The other thing is too,
just quickly, Jeremy, who's obviously in New Zealand, saying that that Lawson's got a great ad. If if there's a link to that, I wouldn't mind having a look at that. If that's on YouTube anywhere, I wouldn't mind having having a look at that, Jeremy, because I mean we don't see much. I mean he's got a very low profile here. I don't know what the profile. Obviously he's got a higher profile over there, but the profile here obviously of Super Formula is very, very low, and it's really hard. It's Super GT is. I mean, we basically run reports on every Super GT round because their media is pretty good. And in terms of getting access to race highlights and stuff in English and reports in English and all the rest of it, we have no problems at all. Super Formula, for some reason, is a lot harder to get hold of. I mean, sometimes you'll get stuff. We ran the round before last, and we ran a report from there. And the most recent round couldn't get anything at all that we could put on air for the television show over here in Pit Lane. So it's very hard to keep up with what's going on and the news. And I've contacted them a few times and said, "Hey guys, can you send us some? Do you have anything?" And they just said, "We don't really have much. We don't really have any English."
Just before we close the book on Formula One too. And it comes down to a couple of the, not satellite teams or the B-grade teams, whatever it is, but it has been suggested in the last couple of weeks as well too, because, there's the Williams link to the Silver Arrows and so forth, that a couple of the B-spec teams are hoping for some relaxations or some leniency when it comes to components and the transition of, because it got banned a couple of years ago when AlphaTauri were just basically grabbing whatever was the previous year from the Red Bull team, Premier team. They got the hand-me-downs, and they were able to stay confidently mid-pack amongst it. Now, obviously, since they brought into those regulations a couple of years ago that they couldn't do it, there's a few rumours circling that they possibly might be able to get some better hand-me-downs and maybe some because you're not actually allowed to copy another teams, but the trouble is though they are almost legitimately owned by the same person, as Pete said a minute ago. So they're hoping
if they make it a separate team like Haas with Ferrari, they can.
So that's another thing as well though too.
Okay, we're running out of time there. Mark, coming up this weekend, I think it's there's Morgan Park is also happening this weekend.
Yeah, Super Series is on down the road there in Morgan Park in Warwick, and unfortunately I can't make it out to that one. I'm a little bit dirty about that, but yeah, very much looking forward to catching the coverage.
Yes, there will be coverage. I think it's who's doing the coverage? I think it's SBS, isn't it? I think there is. I think on the Sunday. I think on the Sunday it's actually on SBS in the Speed Week time slot. So they've got the TA2s will be out there and a lot of the stuff. Richard will be down on the Saturday down at Phillip Island for the latest Victorian round of the Hyundais. Also Supercars down there as well. I'm hoping to get down there myself and do stuff because coming up. I haven't seen any news about the entry yet, but there might be a few extra supercars down there because coming up in August there's a big supercar festival meeting happening at Phillip Island, and certainly the Victorian Supercar Club were expecting that they would probably get a few more interstate entries and a bit more interest with people coming down to get a few laps at Phillip Island before they come on over for the nationals in August. So hopefully the weather will be reasonable and we'll have a good turnout of supercarts. And there's also Pie Sprints. Unfortunately, it's one of those meetings that there's no admittance for spectators, unfortunately. But if you just go and say that you're part of Richard Outram's pit crew, you'll be right. You'll be covered.
Yes. Brett, his racing team. Because I'll have two cars down there.
Thank you. It's expanding. We're expanding to a two-car team. We're marvellous.
Quickly, we're running out of time, so I'm not going to go. I'll just do a quick MotoGP report with, and I'm going to channel my Kimi Räikkönen and go, we have the week off.
Yes, and congratulations. Unfortunately, I've lost some time today. We had Jet Lawrence, who we interviewed on the program. Doc and I caught up with him just before the pandemic.
Awesome
Great
guys.
guy, he and his brother. They have dominated, absolutely destroyed. You talk about domination from Verstappen. Well, Jet Lawrence has won every single race. He out of the possible 250 points you could get into about 5 rounds in or whatever it is. He's got every single one of them. He's hardly actually been in second place for a lap. He's basically started off and he's just dominated. Unfortunately, I did put in a news story. Which will be seen on Channel 31. It definitely won't be seen on YouTube because the moment I put it on, not only did I get a YouTube content idea, I immediately was thrust into the legal letter from the AMA in the United States saying you are not authorised to talk. You are not authorised to even talk about our series, let alone report on it. So there you go.
Their Marvel Stadium, when I was there, we were doing all that stuff there. Great bunch of guys. That's when the
that will be coming back again to the I think it's November, late November. The Supercross Masters will be back at whatever they're calling it, the World Motocross. That Tony Cochran's involved with. That'll be coming back to Marvel Stadium. It's also going to run at Adelaide as well. I think about the week or 2 weeks before.
There's the presser we went to as well too. You can see all the guys all lined up. I think one of the Lawrence brothers was in that presser along that line there as well too. So
yeah, I think it was Jet, and Jet was the one. So that'll be on. That's on the YouTube channel somewhere too. If you want to catch up, really nice little laid back sort of And once again, Marky's another one of these bloody Queenslanders.
Oh, that's all right.
But anyway, I'm sure whatever you're doing on the weekend, Mark, you'll be a damn sight warmer doing it than we will be doing what we're doing, especially down at Phillip Island.
Please send some of that orange bloody big thing in the sky down to us. We need it really. At the moment.
God, it's been miserable. It's been the worst winter I think that I can remember.
Don't even know what that
for many years.
You should complain. You should be up here.
Up
you're up there. It's probably snowing up there, so.
Yeah.
Well, I had
But
to
anyway-
have a jacket on yesterday, so that was we've had a rough couple of days.
Well, see, I haven't had a jacket. I went out and bought. I spent $150 on warm gear and wet weather stuff because normally I just spend the whole year in a t-shirt regardless of the weather, and because of this job that I was supposed to be on, that's why I'm here. Like, we weren't supposed to be, or I wasn't supposed to be.
It'll come in
anyway.
handy for you, Brett. It'll come in handy. There will be
I said that the last warm coat that I've got, and I've worn it once in 30 years. So
yeah, but Phillip Island, I'll encourage you to take it down with us. You can be in summer, it can be down on 10 degrees.
That is,
Thanks, Knackers.
Yeah, World Supercross is at Marvel in November. The Aussie Supercross 3 round Newcastle, Marvel the day before the World Supercross, and then Adelaide on the calendar as well.
Try and make
and
that.
Also,
we'll have to get the invite to that again, Brett, to do the Supercross because there were a bunch of guys to have a chat with.
They were good to work with. I mean, Tony Cochran's involved, so yeah, I'm sure we won't have any problems there. Paul's also saying Australian Superbike Championships at Morgan Park the weekend after next. So there's another one you might be able to get to, Mark, if you can get out there. So. So there's so we got the superbikes coming up, but yeah, most of the things are happening. But we got the 6 hour at Phillip Island is coming up fairly soon. We've got the historics.
So I'm going to jump in on you, Brett. There, I have accreditation like you, Brett. So at least both of us can make that as well too. I've got mine approved. Not 50, but it's in.
Yeah, Hunter had dominated, but he lost. He crashed on basically the first corner. He had dominated, so the Lawrence brothers were just absolutely destroying it over there and just winning absolutely everything. But yeah, Hunter, unfortunately, he won the first race to keep his perfect record intact, and then crashed at turn one in the second moto. So. but congratulations to the Lawrence brothers, and once again, continuing that incredible history of really competitive of international motocross riders that we've had over the years with people like Chad Reed and the like. Okay, everyone, look, I think that's we better move off now. We've gone 6 minutes over, and it's not in the spirit of cricket, so I think we will say thank you to everybody. Have a good weekend, whatever you're doing. As I said, if you're down at Phillip Island on the Saturday, hoping to get down there myself, and if we do, now I'll let you know that next week on In Pit Lane, not this week, tomorrow night, but next week, should be really good. I'm going out to have a long chat with a guy called Ian Smith, and if you, as I say tonight on the program this week, if you're of my generation or something around, so many of the memories you have of Australian motorsport are because of Ian Smith. And in fact, probably if one memory in particular, if I say, Bob, Jane, T-Marts, you have a look at that. You have a look at that logo. That's an Ian, taken from an Ian Smith photo. Ian has been around from the 60s, 70s, right through till today. He's still going out and filming stuff. He was up at the recent Winton Speed Series round as well, filming sort of us shooting sports sedans and the like. He's got so many stories. He's been friends with so many legends of the Australian motorsport industry. And I'm going out to his place on Monday and spending a couple of hours with him out there. And we're going to have a really long chat. So, yeah, really looking forward to that. So that'll come up next week, hopefully, on In Pit Lane. That's Thursday night, 9 o'clock on Channel 31. Okay, everybody, and as Box is saying, thanks, guys. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy your week, everybody, and we'll see you hopefully next week, same time here on Full Course Yellow. But until then, see you later, everyone. Bye for now.
Throw those stumps down. Have a great weekend.